That's Nick.
And that's Joseph. And today we're here to talk about the best and worst films that premiered at the 2022 Venice Film Festival, the 79th edition of the festival. And of course, these are according to just, my own opinions and standards.
How long were you at the festival?
The whole time.
The whole time.
All them days.
How many films did you watch?
About 60.
And then how many reviews did you write?
40, including all 23 of the competition films.
So all of those are at ioncinema.com.
Correct. And I wrote one review for...
One. Little sad review for us. It's okay.
Do you remember what that was?
No, because I haven't posted it yet.
You haven't posted it yet?
I've been busy.
I've been busy.
Oh, wow. So you should relate.
Well, Walter Hill's Dead for a Dollar will post on Fish Jelly.
So first you're going to start with your favorites.
No, you always start with the negative. Get that out of the way.
Oh, okay.
Well, they're less interesting to talk about. There are films that were just terrible, or I didn't really care for them.
So let's go.
Starting from kind of the bottom up of that, Bardo, False Chronicle of a Handful of Truths, which was Alejandro González Inarritu's film, that played the second day of the film festival, starring an actor I tend to usually really like, especially in Lucrecia Martel's Zama, but Daniel Jimenez Cacho stars as this journalist / documentarian that's going to accept this prestigious award. He's the first Latin American, the first Mexican to receive this award, and kind of him navigating all of his childhood memories and traumas that made him the man he is, which is paralleled with the contentious history of Mexico and the United States. And that sounds a lot more interesting than it is. It is a grand spectacle of empty-headedness, and including with the problem being the main character is just not a very interesting or notable person. Like, he's at 3 hours running length, it's really tedious sitting with this character, despite, all of the interesting visual elements going on. But I actually was much more of a fan of Birdman, his 2014 film that won Best Picture. And I know that you kind of liked The Revenant as well, which Inarritu directed. That was his last feature, which Leonardo DiCaprio won an Oscar for. Inarritu, who's kind of known as being very outspoken, is aware, I read, that it had received such a negative critical backlash, and basically cited that there's an underlying hint of racism about that, which I think is kind of a cheap shot. I don't think it's a very interesting film ultimately.
Next.
Chiara, directed by Susanna Nicchiarelli, which is a period piece set in the years 2011 to 2028, and basically is kind of a recuperation of Saint Clare of Assisi, who of course was a counterpart of Saint Francis of Assisi, who is much more notable. Their friendship has been documented in other films. I thought this was a religious fantasy that was very interminable and tedious, and also kind of a musical which doesn't really work, and basically just rather corny, but I didn't care for it. But the only Italian female director in the competition.
Next.
L'Immensité, another Italian film that was part of the competition, the first film since 2011 directed by Emanuele Crialis, starring Penelope Cruz. There are elements I did like. It's basically a coming-of-age story, 1970s Rome, of this young trans boy who's nobody's really acknowledging their gender identity, but they have a really great relationship, and their mother, who has, of course, a nervous breakdown, and it becomes very rote from there. However, Penelope Cruz is giving me Sophia Loren and has a fabulous wardrobe in the film, but overall very cliche.
Okay. The Sun?
The Sun. Oh, you can read my writing from here. Really didn't like The Sun, the sophomore film directed by Florian Zeller, whose first film, The Father, I think was your favorite film last year.
Oh, yes.
Yes, so this is part of his familial trilogy, of which there's the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost. The Father, the Mother, and the Son. So his next film has been The Son. It's been relocated from France to New York. And I've read the play. And I liked the play via text, but this just is too earnest and ham-fisted in all the wrong ways, and reeks of like white privilege, at least in this version. And Hugh Jackman is acting his little heart out. Both he and Laura Dern, I think, give fine performances, but the main character of the son, I think, is completely miscast. and just is tedious. And I know that the variety critic that broke embargo to have the glowing praise for it would have suggested that there would have been a different reaction to this film, but I, for one, really did not care for it.
Moving on.
Padre Pio, Abel Ferrara's film that played in the Horizon Sidebar, starring Shia LaBeouf as the famous monk Padre Pio, in English, which makes no goddamn sense, and also was just very tedious to have to sit through. I really didn't enjoy it, and I am actually quite a big fan of Abel Ferrara. But
moving on.
Beyond the Wall, the third film from an Iranian film director that played in competition, Vahid Jalilvand. I liked his last film, No Date, No Signature, which I watched right before the festival started in preparation. This film has it's one of those films that has this significant secret that really doesn't make any sense, and has lead performance from a newcomer that is just all screaming, snot, and more screaming, and I can see what it's doing, and kind of using auditory signaling to segue between trauma of the past and present, and come to find, there's again a significant secret that it thinks it's being smart, but it really is not at all. And I know some people did like this film. I loathed it, but
next.
And then my least favorite film of the entire festival was another Penelope Cruz film called On the Fringe. Juan Diego Botto is a notable actor. This is his directorial debut, and it's styled like Paul Haggis's Crash, but all about a social issue movie about evictions in Spain. And Penelope Cruz is this woman who's a mother who's married and facing eviction, and she's got that haircut that suggests, things can't be going well for her. It's just so on the nose and very tedious, and all of the things that are kind of wrong with this kind of formula of a film, I think that this film really heavily leans into, and it has a compelling message at the heart, but is not a pleasant experience.
All right, so let's get this done. Your favorites of the film festival. You're starting with number 10.
Number 10, The Eternal Daughter, directed by Joanna Hogg, a follow-up to her Souvenir films, where she reunites with Tilda Swinton, and she's again using Swinton kind of fetishistically to explore remnants of her own life, because it's focused on a mother that is visiting an old family home that's become a hotel, a daughter with her mother, and the daughter is kind of basically a version of Joanna Hogg, this filmmaker who doesn't have children, i.e. will be an eternal daughter to her mother. And of course, that does have a secret that I think is obvious from a long way off, but Tilda Swinton plays both characters, which is really interesting. And I especially kind of like watching Tilda as an older woman. It reminded me of a lot of Italian giallo films. It's a very slight film, but very moody. Joanna Hogg shows Swinton, secretly trying to, within the film, try to tell a story about her mother, and reading like Rudyard Kipling's They, which is a supernatural semi-autobiographical tale. It reminded me of Mario Bava's Shock a little bit in Daughters of Darkness, but nothing so lurid as either of those films are. But I think if you like Joanna Hogg or kind of that tone of film, that you would find it enjoyable.
Number 9.
The Banshees of Inisherin, the latest film from Martin McDonagh, which I was going into dreading because I disliked Three Billboards Outside Ebbing, Missouri so much, which did win Best Picture, and Frances McDormand a Best Actress Oscar. And I believe at that Venice Film Festival won Best Screenplay. This film surprisingly won Best Screenplay and Best Actor for Colin Farrell, which is really surprising because I really expected Brendan Fraser to take that award from this jury for The Whale. Anyhow, I don't know that this is a film that needed to be in a competition, but it's very entertaining. It's kind of about a bad romance in 1923 Ireland, where there's a civil war going on the mainland, and this small village community on this island, where Brendan Gleeson decides that he has limited amount of time to do what he wants to do, and he wants to stop wasting his time with Colin Farrell's character, who's basically got nothing to ever really talk about. And Farrell's character doesn't take it very well, and then it slowly becomes kind of a horror film in very interesting ways. And I really like Carrie Condon as Farrell's sister.
Number 8.
Number 8, Love Life, directed by Kōji Fukada. Fukada has a way of taking kind of pulp stories and then flattening them out to get to interesting character tics going on. And I really like his previous film, A Girl Missing, which was a Locarno film. But this is first time competing in Venice. It's about the death of a child and the couple at the heart of it who are driven because of that tragedy back to the people that they were last in a relationship with, because they just can't face each other in their grief. And I think it's a very well-written and interesting film.
Number 7.
Number 7, Bones and All, directed by Luca Guadagnino, from the novel by Carmen de Angelis, which won Guadagnino Best Director at this festival. And Taylor Russell won the best, I'm forgetting the exact name of it, but like the Best Young Person's Award. And I do think that she is the beating heart of the film. It's a cannibal love story, if you will. And usually, almost always the book is better than the film, but I really like what Guadagnino does with this, because the book felt a little bit YA to me, and this is much darker. And I think it really exists on a continuum. I don't think it's nearly as great as something like Terrence Malick's Badlands, but it's on a continuum with that and something like Twilight, which of course is utter trash to me, but it does have things that reminded me of that, albeit in a very enjoyable way. Also stars, of course, Timothée Chalamet, but Mark Rylance is super weird and creepy, and I loved every scene with him. He really reminds me of the personification of, I'm forgetting his name, what's that pedophile from Family Guy?
Oh, is the little old man.
Is it Herb the Perv or something?
Something.
He really is reminding me of that in this. But yes, highly enjoyable.
Number 6.
Number 6 is actually a restoration. I saw it as part of the Venice Classics, and usually I never get to have time to see those kind of restorations at film festivals. But I saw Teresa the Thief. It's a 1973 film directed by Carlo de Palma. It's the directorial debut of Carlo de Palma, but he's much better known as a very famous cinematographer. He shot Antonioni's Blow Up and many Woody Allen films, including Mighty Aphrodite and Manhattan Murder Mystery. This is an adaptation of a novel by Dacia Maraini, a very famous Italian novelist who often deals with women's rights issues. And this stars a very fly Monica Vitti as a woman from childhood to later adulthood who basically has to resort to thievery coming of age during World War II and afterwards. But it's actually very funny. And I'm assuming based on the restoration, it'll get a very nice release coming up in the next year, and I cannot wait to show you that film because I thought it was in a tradition of the way that films and even kind of how women's stories aren't really even told today, but I really liked it.
Number 5.
Number 5, the contentious film directed by Andrew Dominik, Blonde, the imaginative recuperation of the life of Marilyn Monroe, based on a 2000 novel by Joyce Carol Oates, which I'm also a big fan of. And I think that it stays very clear to the essence of what Oates was doing, basically just giving us an impression of Marilyn Monroe and taking, of course, great liberties. And I think that Dominik does a really impressive visualization of that. And Ana de Armas, who, although you will hear her accent at some points, is probably the best impression of Marilyn that has been committed to film that's not Marilyn. I think she really has the essence of her down. And again, I think you are able to get past that accent when you realize this is really just an impression of her. Several highlights are, talking about some of the films that she does in her love lives, including, the men she married, like Arthur Miller, who's played by Adrian Brody, or Bobby Cannavale, who's Joe DiMaggio, who's, I think, not quite... There are elements of the film that don't quite work, including some really crazy moments, like her having a correspondence with her fetus. That might take you out of it, but there's so many famous images of Marilyn, and he weaves a lot of those into the texture of the narrative and the story, as if some of these are pictures that have really literally come to life. And if you didn't know it, taken out of context, you might see Ana de Armas and think that she actually is Marilyn. But a very heavy film, a very dark film. It's about kind of bringing this woman up and then tearing her down. There are vaginal POV shots because there's a forced abortion scene, there's miscarriage, and I think that Dominik is trying to make a statement about how much we think as the public we own somebody and their celebrity, and this is like, you can't get much more intimate than being in the inside of somebody. And there were lots of charges of misogyny and this film being voyeuristic, but just because the film is dealing with a misogynistic world and a woman that was torn down in it, and I think that how would you depict that otherwise? The film is not by nature being misogynistic. It is showing a world that is, and Americans are so puritanical. I cannot believe this has an NC-17 rating. That is just ridiculous. Like, we're so afraid of female genitalia that is NC-17. That's shameful to me. But whether or not you like it, it definitely is a 3-hour experience, and I will be very curious to see what you think.
Number 4.
Number 4, All the Beauty and the Bloodshed, directed by Laura Poitras, which is a documentary that's doing a couple things. It's about the opioid crisis through the lens of Nan Goldin, the photographer, artist, but it's also kind of a biography of Goldin's experiences, and it's very moving, very human, very poignant. It did not surprise me that this won the Golden Lion, the top prize. And I would say that my top 3 favorite films in the competition all won an award, and I think this was fitting. But yeah, the lot to unpack there. But a really fascinating snapshot of this woman beyond kind of her struggles with Oxycontin. This documentary would have been deserved on her without even that, and taking down the Sattler family. But anyhow.
Number 3,
Saint Omer, directed by Alice Diop. She's a documentarian. Her last film was a documentary called We, from 2021 that I saw in Berlin. And this I was blown away by. This is about a journalist played by Kaija Kagame, who goes to witness the trial of this woman in this northern French town that's very conservative, and she's a Senegalese immigrant woman who is being charged with murdering her 15-year-old. And for the 2-hour running time, I want to say there are at least 2 45-minute chunks where just are static shots of courtroom proceedings, and it is fascinating. It's painful. It is very human, and also relating to the Medea mythos, and all about women, black women, seeing each other and kind of giving back these experiences that you just don't see. And I don't know, like there was so much to unpack in this film, visually and thematically, and it was very impressive. And it did win the Grand Jury Prize. I think this also would have been fine winning the Golden Lion to me.
Number 2
also was mixed reaction, was Master Gardener, directed by Paul Schrader, which is of course the third part of his thematic Man in a Room trilogy following First Reformed and The Card Counter. He's tackling white supremacy this time around, and stars Joel Edgerton and fantastic Sigourney Weaver as this elitist woman whose garden he runs, and the garden themes are very heavy, and like as in, do you water the seeds of love or hate? And it's about this man's redemption story, and he has this sexual relationship with the older Sigourney Weaver and her younger niece, played by Quintessa Sindel. Lot of weird, interesting things in there. It's definitely a Paul Schrader film, mining very familiar themes, even going back to things like American Gigolo or Hardcore. But Sigourney Weaver has this scene with a Luger that is very much Joan Crawford in Sudden Fear to me. She looks fantastic, and I was definitely there for it. I was not disappointed.
And number 1,
my favorite film, which I might end up being my number 1 film of the year. I cannot wait for you to see it. Tar, directed by Todd Field. His first film since 2006, Little Children. He's also known for In the Bedroom. This was a project conceived by and around or for Cate Blanchett, and it is it's watching a lion. She is this conductor of the Berlin Philharmonic, and she's this if you can find a narcissistic sociopath aspirational, that's her in this film as Lydia Tarr, whose life is about to kind of unravel because of all the things she's been doing. She's a lesbian. She's married to Nina Haas, who I think has a very limited but pertinent side performance that I really liked. Actually, everybody's kind of like blinked out by, eclipsed by how magnificent Bloodshed is, and she might win. She won Best Actress at the festival, her second time winning Venice after I'm Not There, and I could really think she might win a third Oscar for this film. But just fantastic to watch. It's tackling cancel culture. It has all these really it's invested in a very specific particular world where there's all these references that I think if you're not really kind of studying a lot of this, you might not know it, but you get what they're talking about, and it's just fantastically written. Mark Strong. The way I felt about this film afterwards is the same way I felt after watching Isabelle Huppert and The Piano Teacher, as in just pretty floored by there just really aren't performances that are allowed to kind of reveal themselves like that, and I really loved it.
So, do you have anything else to say about the Venice Film Festival this year?
Oh my God, so since the COVID-19 pandemic, as festivals have come back now, even press, everything is ticketed, which in essence I don't mind. I don't like having to queue for hours to get a decent seat. You get a ticket, you can show up right beforehand, blah, blah, blah. But they changed their system of how they were doing tickets this year. And especially the first like 3 or 4 days, it would take, and granted you could get tickets 48 hours in advance, but it would take 3 to 5 hours the first couple of days. They were kind of getting their bugs figured out. And that was a nightmare. Also, compared to last year, of course, there's no social distancing, and every seat was packed. So, and I stayed on the mainland, so getting back and forth, it was just busy till the end, which last year I remember feeling there was much more of a lull. But yeah, I don't know. It's an all work and no play kind of festival. It's a very contained, small area in the Lido, so it actually was. I actually do like getting out of that world and able to go right and eat other kinds of food. But yeah, I don't know. I think it was a really impressive lineup. There were a lot of things. There were much more than I disliked or was mediocre on. There were a lot of really great films, especially in the competition. Yeah.
Right.
And it wasn't in my top 10, but there was a new Isabelle Huppert film, The Sitting Duck, which she did give an enjoyable performance in.
Anything else?
No.
Hit the thanks button. Listen to our podcast. Bye.